All right, folks. So let's get started here. And do let me know as we go along if you have any questions about what we are doing and if there's any difficulties. All right. I'll try to keep the chat window, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat window to see if there's questions. And I'll also try to see if there's any raised hands. I'll come to those maybe at the end of every slide. I'll take a look, or every two slides, I'll take a look to see if there's any questions. All right. So to begin with, I'm going to just start presenting my screen. So give me a moment here. All right. Great. So my screen should be showing up any moment now. All right. Okay. So thank you all for attending live. I really appreciate it. It really helps me get some feedback that there are real people that are here, and I can see a little bit of your expression, and it helps me understand if you're understanding. Okay. Once again, I do ask that if you can turn on the video, and if that's really, only turn it off if like the stream quality is really bad. Okay. One more thing, I might try to take a break at around 8:50 or so, because I think the stream quality drops off after 1 hour. So if anybody starts feeling like the stream quality is really dropping quickly, do let me know, okay? Those of you with ISS students, you may have a slight advantage if you log in with your ISS account to Google Meet. You might actually get a better stream quality because technically you're part of the same G Suite that I'm broadcasting from, all right? Okay. So let me get started, and do raise your hands and let me know if you have questions. All right, cool. So first of all, welcome back. We are on week 13 now, and today we're going to do a few security related things, but we're also going to focus a lot on some infrastructural things. So once again, for students who took my SOA class before, there'll be quite a bit of repeat in today's class. However, there'll be some things that are also very new, okay? So today I want to do a few things. I want to talk about uh, 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 I want to like wrap up a few topics from last week about security of our and overall system. I want to talk a little bit about a lot about deploying our applications to the cloud this week, and then we want to go back and secure some of the communications that we're doing that we haven't really considered in the previous weeks. All right, so I'm going to get started with that. But before I do, I want to see if does anybody have any questions or concerns about what we did last week? Anyone? You're okay with everything? All right, cool. All right, so let me get started then. So week 13. Last week, we took a look at a few things about the web application, which we introduced to our system last week, okay? And this week, I want to kind of make everything a little bit more robust and also deploy them as well. So let's get started. So this was the state of our system last week. And what we could do last week was essentially, we allowed people to, on our local machines, log in with credentials, and we kind of created and our web application would essentially talk to our API to ensure the right person was logged in. And we would create cookies and store our session data in cookies. So who's logged in, what their username is stored in a cookie that is on the browser side. So whenever people come back, with every request, when they come back to our web application, they return a cookie with all the information about their session, particularly, again, their username and email, all right? And this is the way that we simulate a user experience by storing their session information in cookies, all right? The database is simply keeping information about all the accounts and other associated resources, all right? One thing we did last week was that we ensured, hold on a second, I'm going to set up my little screen pointer here. So let me see if this works. Yay, it works. So we we enforced TLS or secure connections between the web application and the API. And in fact, what we said is if anybody tries to contact the web API and they're not coming in over HTTPS, we simply tell them sorry. We give them an error, and we tell them you have to use TLS to come in. All right. So today I want to discuss what should we do about the web application. Should the web application do the same thing? Should it tell the browser, look, sorry, you're not allowed to come in, you're not using HTTPS? Or should we instead ask it to redirect itself and say, please, here's the URL to come in over HTTPS? Let's take a look at what some popular web services do. So for example, if we try to connect to gmail.com, all right, just using the HTTP tool on the command line, and I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. All right, I'm going to hide this little bar at the bottom. Let's see what Gmail tells us if I try to come in through a non-secure connection. Gmail. All right, here's the response from Gmail. And just to be clear, let me just actually go to verbose mode. I think it's -V if I remember correctly. So this is my request. I'm making a request using HTTP and for the root resource, for the root resource, all right? And this is what Gmail responds to me. It returns some HTML, but let's look at the headers. First of all, the error is returned an error code to me. This is not 200 OK. This is 301. It's saying I have moved permanently. I am not available at HTTP/, all right? So it's returning an error code of 301, and all the 300 error codes are redirection error codes. They're essentially saying you have to come back somewhere else, and I'll tell you where. And what it does then is in the headers itself of its response, after it's told me there's an error, it gives me a new location. It tells me, please come back to me over HTTPS at www.gmail.com/gmail. Okay. And then for browsers, it also returns an HTML, which says the same thing. The document has moved, 301 moved, and here is the URL to come back at. Well, it could be two things. It could be that I'm not coming in over HTTPS, or maybe I'm not using the right URL, which is www.google.com/gmail. So let me try this again. And this time, instead of gmail.com, I'm going to just try to come in over the correct URL, but still using HTTP to see if it's HTTP or the URL that's the issue. Okay, let's give it a shot. Google says 302, I found what you're looking for, but you need to come back over a different address. And once again, it gives me the location. So I'm coming over the right route and the right host name, but once again, it insists you must use HTTPS and it redirects me. All right. So this is what an example of what Google does. And this is a common practice in web applications, which is if somebody is trying to come in over a non-secure connection, it's considered a best practice today to simply redirect them and tell them, please come back in another way. Why not simply block them and say, I don't accept any insecure connections? I mean, that's what we did for the connection between the web application and the web API. We simply forbid them. So why to redirect them? Does anybody have any suggestions? You can raise your hand if you'd like to speak. All right. Yeah, go ahead. Unmute yourself and let us know why you think that which way to do it is better. Great. So can you give me at least one reason, but maybe another reason as well about why it's better to ask the browser to redirect? What's the advantage in doing that? You can tell me a user experience story or a technical story, whatever you want. Sure, sure. Reduces human error. I can go with that. Cool. Thank you. All right. And anybody else have any other suggestions about which way to do it and why? Anybody? No guesses? Everyone's nervous to guess an answer? What do you think? Let me take a vote. Just raise your hand if you think instead of redirecting them, we should make it forbidden. We should not allow them to come in over it. We should just tell them stop. Anybody want to raise your hand? I'll raise my hand so you don't feel shy. Anybody else want to raise your hand and say yes, just stop them and say don't come in, don't redirect them. Anybody? Oh, yes, we're getting a few more people. Excellent. Thank you. All right. So could I ask any of the people who are raising your hand? Oh, I trapped you now. Any of the people raising your hand, could you tell me why you prefer to actually stop them and not redirect them? I'll lower your hands. If you would like to speak, you can just unmute yourself and speak. Anybody? You had reasons. Okay, let me ask this other question. How many of you would prefer to actually redirect it the way Google does it? You can raise, I'll raise my hand too, so you're not shy. All right. Oh, the class is quite split. We have a split. Oh no. Okay. Does anybody else other than Brandon want to tell me why you prefer redirecting then? You can just unmute yourself and speak. Anybody? Anybody? Help me out here. Don't make me feel lonely. Somebody tell me something. Yeah. Riley, go ahead. Oh, okay. Yes. Got it. Excellent. Okay, well, that was not Riley, that was Shelley. So thank you. Yeah, that was that's yeah, sure. One is just the user experience. You don't want the user to feel like, what? What happened? This is something went wrong. Remember, the whole concept of security is to remove doubt and uncertainty and fear from the user. That's like the overall service idea of what security is. Not necessarily the technical one, but the service idea of security is to remove fear and doubt and uncertainty. So I do agree that that remove that redirecting them is a more pleasant and less uncertain experience for users. So I do kind of go with that, and I do see there's arguments the other way, and I'll tell you a couple more reasons, or maybe one more reason why we want to do that. Okay, so in this class, we will redirect. I will suggest to you, unless you have a strong reason otherwise, to redirect people through code to come in over HTTPS. All right. There's a couple of ways to do it. If you are the admin of a server, like if you are running and controlling the server that you are deploying your system on, there's a file in Unix you can create. It's called a .htaccess file. I put a link down here in the slides that you can look at, which tells you how to use the .htaccess file, and that will force anybody visiting your site. It'll tell your local server to force anyone visiting your site to be redirected over HTTPS. So that's one way to do it. Okay. But I'll show you another way to do it through code, and that's the way I'm going to implement it this semester because I don't have access to the .htaccess of the production server we're going to be deploying on. Okay, so the other way to do it is through a simple gem, and actually it's not really a gem; it's an HTTP header called HSTS. So HSTS is a HTTP header. So in the response, so we tell them to redirect. We are going to tell them to redirect. And this gem called rack SSL enforcer will do that for us. All right. So you have to have the gem in your gem file, and then you've just got to require it in your environments.rb. All right. And and then in your configuration in your environments.rb, in your production configuration, you can simply use that SSL enforcer. And it'll do two things. One is it will give people a 301 or 302 error code to tell them, please come back in over HTTPS, and it'll give them the location. So whatever the current URL they're trying to access, they will redirect them to the same URL, but using HTTPS. So this gem will just do that for you. It'll set the error code and the location header in the response. All right. So what you saw here was it'll essentially create this error code and this location header. Will it do anything else? Yes, it'll do one more thing that I don't really see here, which is in production, and please, not in development or test, but only in production, it will do one more thing. I have told this gem also set the HSTS header to true. And let me explain what HSTS is. HSTS is a strict security header. So in your headers of your HTTP response, the gem will insert this line. It will essentially say strict transport security, that's the name of the header, and it'll give it an age. What this header essentially does is it tells the browser that this URL requires HTTPS. And in fact, the browser will remember this. And the next time, if the user types in HTTP to come to this address, the browser will automatically change it to HTTPS. All right. So we're actually telling the browser, remember that this is an HTTPS address. Do not come back to me over HTTP. And that way, the browser, even if the user asks it to go to an HTTP address on your server, the browser will actually automatically change the address to HTTPS. All right. So we're actually controlling the browser directly here and informing its behavior. So this speeds up future interactions because in future, the browser will not attempt the HTTP address. It'll jump straight to HTTPS. Okay. This max age is basically telling the browser, I think in seconds, for the next long period of time, please remember to come back over HTTPS. All right. So essentially, we're taking control of the browser here and telling the browser, don't try to come in over HTTP again. So the technical advantage here is if the user tries to come in over HTTP, not only do we redirect them, but if they try to make another interaction with us, potentially a more risky one, like sending us their credentials, their username and password, the browser will remember this website does not like HTTP. Let's do this over HTTPS, okay? So it's more secure from that technical standpoint too, that the browser will remember and automatically switch to HTTPS before trying HTTP, all right? Okay, so, and in fact, I think I have a production server. I hope it works in production. Let's try this on my production server. So it is Credence 2021 API herokuapp.com. Let me try to make a request. And okay, I'm getting this. I do not see the HSTS. I have to see what's going on. All right. It should give me an HSTS message because I kind of enforced that. So either I'm missing something or it's not working. So I'll have to take a look. Okay. For now, I'm getting a forbidden error. Oh, let me try another. Let me just try API/v1. All right. It still is telling me this. I'm not getting the HSTS. I wonder why. Let me go back and take a look at this. Why? My TA, Edgar, please remind me to find out why the HSTS header is not set. Okay, it should be set on production mode at least. Okay, all right, so I'll get back to you on what this is and we'll try to get this working. Okay, let me see if there's any questions. No hands raised, no chats. Okay, moving on. This week, so I've already preempted this. This week, we're going to try to deploy our API and our web application to Heroku. For those of you who've taken my SOA class before, this should be old stuff. For those of you who used Heroku before, which a lot of you are familiar with, I noticed, maybe this is familiar to you, but there'll be a couple of new things in here for all of you, I think. All right. So first of all, if you're not familiar with Heroku, and there's several of you in this class who maybe are not familiar with Heroku, it's simply cloud deployment for dummies, and I'm a dummy, okay? So it's a very simple cloud deployment platform called Heroku. And let me zoom in here to kind of show you what Heroku suggests. So Heroku is very popular with startups, but I will say I do know companies with tens of millions of users who who use Heroku. It is I'm using it in this class because it's really easy to deploy on Heroku, and that way I don't have to get into a lot of infrastructural issues. What else? Moreover, Heroku has this great advantage that if you don't know much about infrastructure and security, it takes care of a lot of things for you automatically. It sets up a TLS certificate for you automatically. So if you come to it over the herokuapp.com URL that you just saw, it automatically provides you with its own security certificate so you can use HTTPS with it automatically. All right. What else does it do for you? First of all, it's free for a very limited usage, and it's enough for development purposes. It might be even enough if you just have a few customers. All right. So the free account that you can create essentially allows your app to run for 30 minutes at a time. And your application, if it exceeds 30 minutes, Heroku will put it to sleep. All right, meaning if no one has access to your server for 30 minutes, the server will go to sleep. And if someone accesses it while it's sleeping, it'll take a few seconds to come back to life. All right. So if you have a lot of users, that's not an ideal experience because some people will find it asleep and then it'll take a few seconds to respond. Um, there is another thing which is not listed here per se, but you are only allowed, I think, 18 hours of use per day. So if you have people coming in heavily and using it all day long, then Heroku will tell you, hey, you need to start paying for this because you seem to have customers all day long. Okay. So as long as you're just doing development or just have a very few users, the free account is good enough. All right. How much do you have to pay? If you want the minimum level, it's about $7 for the smallest level, so that it never sleeps and it allows you to have people coming in all the time. All right. So $7 is remarkably cheap. A couple of things. Heroku actually does, as I mentioned before in class, Heroku doesn't actually have its own servers. Heroku is just running on AWS. It's just a very, very nice interface to AWS. Okay. Um, so it uses AWS. Now, remarkably, $7 per month, $7 per month is cheaper than the cheapest AWS machine you can get on EC2. So that's really weird. How does Heroku do that? So they're taking a little bit of a loss potentially and giving you $7. I think Heroku charges like 9 or 10 US dollars. I'm not sure. Maybe the prices have changed. Okay. So they're giving it to you a little cheaper that if you want to pay for it. All right. And the hobby is good enough for, I will say, if you have hundreds of users and they're not coming in at the same time, but you have, let's say, hundreds of users or even maybe thousands of users, but they're all coming in scattered around the day, the hobby development is probably okay for a very small business. All right, so that's really good news. The standard starts at 25 US dollars, and this provides you a more powerful machine and more scalability. At the professional level, you can scale your server. So if you have one, let's say, API running and you have a lot of users coming in, with the standard, you can scale to, let's say, having two or more copies of your server running at the same time. And what Heroku will essentially do, and I don't have a picture of it here, is it'll set up a load balancer and it'll balance the load across multiple instances of your machine. Okay, so Heroku takes care of load balancing as well for you if you pay them. All right, so that's great. And there's other free features that are part of Heroku, and I'll cover them later today. Okay, so that's Heroku. Any questions on Heroku so far? Is everyone okay? Okay, great. You need to set it up, so you need to go to Heroku.com. You need to provide it your SSH public key, just as you did for GitHub. Okay, because you can interact with Heroku from the command line and it will use SSH to kind of confirm who you are, right? The other thing is Heroku will, it's best that you download a command line tool for Heroku from this website I've given you here. So there's a command line tool, it's called Heroku, and you can interact with Heroku from the command line. I highly recommend it, so go ahead and download it if you're using it. All right, cool. Okay, moving on. So we're gonna use Heroku. How do you set it up? Now I'm gonna go through the setup and it's gonna take quite a bit of time because there's quite a few setup things to do. But they're not hard, just a few setup things to do. All right. Okay. Let's get started. First of all, before I get started with this, can I take a quick poll? Can you raise your hand if Google Meet is already giving you some connection issues, or if you're getting kicked off or having video problems? Could you raise your hand if you're already having video problems or connection issues with Google Meet? Anybody? Okay. In my understanding, if we are not part of the same organization, and we are not all part of the same organization, then Google Meet will start throttling or limiting the bandwidth, or maybe even kicking people off after 1 hour. So sometime around, I started my streaming around 9:45, so 8:45, so probably around 9:45, you might start facing connection issues. If that's the case, I'm going to end the meeting and ask you all to rejoin after a short break or something like that. Okay, so that's unfortunately the fact of life with this. So far, so good, I take it. All right. Oh, Yen, okay, two of you are already having problems. Please write in the chat window what issues you're having. Okay, so there was a question here. Can only work. Yes, Raleigh, you're absolutely right. If you notice, I'm recommending that you set HTTPS only on production, and the reason is this, and this is really important that you remember this. If you set up this HSTS in development, you're really going to screw up your browser, because if you try to access localhost and HSTS is set on, then your browser will expect a certificate which you don't have, and it will remember that it's supposed to have a certificate, and and it's very hard to undo the browser from remembering that it's required to have a certificate. So only set up redirection and HSTS on production, all right? Because I've set it up, I once accidentally set it up on development, and it was a nightmare to tell my browser, sorry, kidding, I'm on development. Okay, it didn't believe me ever again. I may have had to uninstall and reinstall that browser, so that was a problem. Okay, all right. So I think, Riley, you're having some connection issues. So do let me know in the chat window what connection issues you're having. All right, okay. Moving on. So yes, please create a Heroku account, SSH key, and download the command line tool. So this is how you create now a Heroku. This is how you create a application on Heroku for your two applications. So you will have to do this both for your web application and for your web API. You'll have to do this separately for each one. Okay. So here are the instructions. I'm going to try to run through them quickly. All right. So first of all, make sure for each web application that you're going to create a Heroku account for, first open up your terminal and move into that account. So for example, here I am in my API, I'm in my API directory, and here I am in my application directory. Okay, so I have two different directories, one for the API, one for the application, and make sure you are in the correct directory when you want to set up the Heroku application for that project. Okay, so for example, for my API, if I want to tell Heroku, listen, I would really like to deploy this application to Heroku, then you start by doing this. You tell Heroku at the command line, once you've installed and logged into the Heroku command line tool, to log into the Heroku command line tool, you have to basically say Heroku login. Once you've logged in, it should remember you're logged in for many months. Okay. So once you've logged in, you basically say Heroku create, and the name of your application. So for example, for my API, um, I wrote Heroku create Credence, and for this semester, I called it Credence 2021 API. So that was the name of my application on Heroku. Okay. And what Heroku does then is it provisions a machine on AWS um, uh, for your application. More accurately, for those of you who are familiar with Docker, it creates a Docker container for you. All right. So Heroku create creates an application. It does not automatically deploy the application yet. It just reserves some space and gives you this name. All right. The name of your application is kind of important because that will be part of the URL for your application when it's deployed on AWS. All right. Great. And once you've created it, it does something really interesting. It creates a remote Git server for you. So let me say git remote -v, and you'll notice now I've got two remotes. Origin, which was my GitHub remote server, and now there's a new remote Git server called Heroku. And Heroku's remote Git server is at git.heroku.com / the name of my application.git. Okay. So now if I'm on the master branch, or any branch, but particularly on the master branch, I can do git push, like usually you do git push origin, I can do git push Heroku, and that'll push my branch to Heroku. All right. Heroku is not really interested in any of your branches. It pretty much ignores all of your branches except for master branch. Anything that you push on the master branch to Heroku will be deployed on Heroku and run on Heroku. All right, so the master branch is the only branch that's interested in. But Heroku is kind of popularized, it did not invent, but it popularized this, what they call git push to deploy model, meaning when you want to deploy or update your server, you just do another git push and it will take your code and launch it from the master branch on AWS. All right. Okay. Brandon, you have a question. Please go ahead. Oh, uh, you're having feedback. So could you ask me the question again? You GitOps. I have never heard that term before. That's so cool. Let me find that term. GitOps. So cool. Continuous deployment for cloud native. It might be. It sounds like it, but I have no idea. For continuous deployment, it focuses on blah, 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 blah. What should I deploy faster, more often? It might be. The term I am more used to is Git push to deploy. So that's the term. So I have to go look up at what GitOps is. You shouldn't ask such good questions because now I have a task for you, which is after the class. Could you please tell us a little bit of what GitOps is on Slack? Because I don't, that'll be really cool. But don't do that now. Stay focused on what we're talking about. Okay. All right. All right. Thank you. All right. All right. So essentially, we get a new Git remote, and we're going to push to that, but not yet. Don't push to it yet. Just let Heroku create this for you. So when you do Heroku create, the Heroku command line application creates that for you and provisions that name and reserves this name for you on Heroku. All right. Okay. Next thing, and of course, we hope that nobody else has taken the name of your application already. All right. Okay, now before you deploy, there's a couple of things you've got to set up. First of all, Heroku would like to know how to run your web application. And the way to tell Heroku how to run your web application is to create something called a proc file. This is capital P, proc file. It basically tells Heroku what are the different processes that you want to run from this code and how to run them. So within proc file, I've got a single line that looks like this. All right, and I'll show you here. Let me go to my Visual Studio Code, and I should have for both my applications, my API and my application, you will notice a proc file. and it's actually the identical file on my API and my web application. All right, so let me show you what the proc file looks like. For now, you only need this single line, and I'll just tell you quickly what it says. The proc file has a single line, and it says, I want to run a web process. So Heroku knows now to open up port 80, because this would be a process that listens to port 80. And this is how to run your application, is to run bundle exec puma, okay? Why not just run rackup? Well, you could run rackup. You could just say rackup here, but bundle exec puma has a slight benefit, which is you can configure the Puma web server for a few things, okay? So I'm going to use bundle exec puma. Puma will totally know that to look in the rackup file, to look in the config.ru file for the full specifications of how to run your application. All right, so running Puma will look at config.ru for you. All right, so bundle exec Puma is a process I want to run. And then I'm going to tell Puma a few configuration details. One is that Puma is a multi-threaded web server, so it can handle multiple requests coming into your server at the same time. And right now I'm telling it, please allow me to run 5 concurrent requests at the same time. All right. Actually, on Heroku, I think this threading thing may or may not have an effect, because Heroku allows you to run as many threads as you want. Okay. So I'm telling it run at minimum 5 and a maximum 5 threads. So it allows you to handle more users, and you can scale those numbers. You can go look up the Heroku help files to see how to set up Puma. All right. The second thing you tell it is what port to run this on. On my local machine, I'm going to run it on port 3000, but that's the default port number is 3000. But Heroku will define its own port. And this -p is saying, please set the port to, and this $sign is saying, please use the environment variable port. And Heroku will set up this port number for you. Okay, so you don't have to set it up for yourself. If there's a port number is not defined in Heroku for any reason, it'll use port 3000, but Heroku will define it for you. Second of all, what environment do you want to run this on? And here I'm telling it, look at the rack env environment variable. Heroku will automatically set up rack env to being production. All right, so I'm telling it use production. If for any reason it cannot find rack env, I'm telling it use a default of developments. All right, so this is some fairly standard Unix notation to kind of tell it what port and what environment to run on. All right, you may wonder, what the hell is a proc file? Proc file is not unique to Heroku. Proc file is basically a file that is used by a gem called foreman. It's a gem that Heroku uses to run multiple processes. So, and you can install Foreman on your own computer and use it to run your application from your proc file. All right. Foreman was originally written in Ruby, and it basically allows you to have a proc file that specifies multiple processes that a server should run. It's so popular now that it's been forked to a whole bunch of other languages. And in fact, lately, Heroku has switched and is using for Go. It's a faster version of Foreman because it's written in the Go language. All right. Okay, so you need to have a proc file. So please put a proc file in both your API and app repository and add it to your Git version control, okay, before you push to Heroku. Any questions so far? So we're going to tell Heroku we want an application with a given name, and then we're going to create a proc file, which we have to add to our version control. All right. I'm going to move on if there's no questions. Okay. So a couple more things you've got to add to your Git repository. In your gem file, you should specify what version of Ruby you want to use in your gem file. Now, we haven't done that on our local machines because on our local machines, we specified using .ruby version, okay? However, Heroku does not look at this Ruby version file because it's not using RBENV, the tool that we are using. It is not using that. So Heroku will not look at .ruby version. Instead, it will look at your gem file and see if you've specified what version of Ruby to use. So what you should do is in your gem file, tell it, here's the version of Ruby you should use. And what is the version? Well, you could either write it out, you could write 3.0.1 right here, or else gem file is actually just a Ruby file, so you can write some Ruby code in here. I'm just telling it, please read the file called Ruby version. Strip is removing any new line or space characters. So it's just telling the gem file, please read the Ruby version file and get this number and put it right here. So that will tell gem file which version of Ruby we are running. And that's how Heroku will know what version of Ruby we're running, is when it processes this gem file. All right. So that's one thing you've got to do. And when you do that, please run bundle install on your local computer. And what it'll essentially do is gem file will automatically put the Ruby version into the gemfile.lock, which is again what Heroku will look at. Heroku will look at this gemfile.lock and say, that's the Ruby version I need to be using. Fantastic. So this is how we inform Heroku of our Ruby version. Yenyu, if you have a question, please go ahead. Oh, I noticed you have something in the chat window as well. I want to ask why the env in proc file is set to development instead of production. Great question. Yenyu, the environment variable is not set to development. It's first telling Unix, first look at the rack env environment variable. If it's defined, use that. And on Heroku, it will have that already in, it will have that, Heroku will automatically set up rack env to be production. However, if there is no rack env defined, then use development. Okay, so development is just a backup default. All right. This is in case you're running the proc file on your local computer. Then on your local computer, if you don't have rack env set up, it'll default to development. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Okay. All right. I'm going to go back and again, do raise your hand if you have questions, folks. Okay. All right. I'll try to look a little bit more regularly. Okay. All right. So set up your gem file with the Ruby version so that your gem file has the Ruby version on it. Okay. One more thing. When your gemfile.lock should, you'll notice here, the gemfile.lock on my computer says platforms Darwin 20 x86. This is telling the gemfile.lock that the gems that are registered for this application are specifically meant for the Intel 86 64-bit architecture running. Darwin is actually a nickname for Mac OS. Or it's actually, I should say, it's the Unix name of Mac OS. Mac OS X is a fork of FreeBSD Unix, so it's the Unix name. So it's telling the gemfile.lock that these gems are known to be installable on Intel x86 architecture, 64-bit running on Mac OS. Okay. However, our deployment machine will not be a Mac server of Mac OS server, obviously. Okay. Heroku, because it's running on AWS, is going to use Unix, is going to use Linux. So what you want to do is you want to adjust your gemfile.lock and tell it that it should be Linux capable. So to do that, after you've done, after you have done all these things, which is after you've set up the proc file, after you have adjusted your gem file and done bundle install, do one more thing, which is run bundle and tell it to add the Intel x86 64-bit Linux architecture to the gemfile.lock. All right. And so that'll edit your gemfile.lock and add x86 64-Linux. All right. And now, once we push this to Heroku, Heroku will look at the gemfile.lock and know that all these gems are also installable on its Linux architecture. All right. Okay. Some of you, if you're already using Linux on your machine, you may already have this under platforms. But just know that Heroku running on AWS is using Amazon's Intel architecture Linux machine, 64 bits. All right, cool. All right, couple more things before we push. Next thing, in your gem, okay, before we push, we got to do a couple more things. One is we've got to set up our application to use a real production database and not the SQLite database that we're just using for testing and development purposes on our machine. Okay, so we have to do a couple of things. The first thing is we've got to edit our application. In this case, the web API is the one that's talking to the database, so only the web API. We have to edit it to tell it that it should be able to use the Postgres database server. Postgres is a very high performance database server. It's open source and it's increasingly becoming one of the most popular database servers out there. And we're going to use that on AWS, on Amazon, okay, for free, but with some limitations I'll mention in a moment. So let's get ready to, and we have to edit our code a little bit, but you'll be surprised how little we have to edit. What you want to do is in your gem file, install the gem called PG. PG is the gem that can talk to Postgres, okay? But make sure you put it in the group called production, all right? We do not want to install PG on your local machine. If you install PG on your local machine, it'll cause some problems because once the PG gem is active, it will look for a Postgres server. If it doesn't find one, it can cause an error, okay? So we only want it in production. However, just putting it in a production group doesn't really do anything in gem file. This is what you got to do next. You've got to tell your local repo that you want to, on your local machine, so tell bundler, on my local machine, please install everything except the production gems, all right? And then run bundle install. What bundle will do now is when you run this config set local command, is bundle will create a folder called .bundle with a file called config. All right. And in that config, it'll say, please remember, do not install production gems. Of course, this is only for our local machine. We do not want our production machines to skip the production gems. So what you should do is you should put this whole .bundle folder in git ignore. This is extremely important. Otherwise, you cannot use Postgres in production. Okay. Just locally, we don't want to install the PG gem. So we tell bundler locally, do not install production gems. Okay. And bundler will remember that by editing this .bundle/config folder in your project. So to make sure that that is only seen in your local repo, not in production, in .gitignore, please ignore the .bundle folder. All right. Any questions so far? Riley, go ahead. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Okay, great question. So you're absolutely right. If you bundle it locally on your own machine, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it causes an error. Because once the PG gem is loaded, it immediately starts looking around for a Postgres server that's running the Postgres database. And it will not find one on your local machine, and it can cause a crash. All right, so we do not want to bundle it on our local machine. So that's what we're going through all these steps for. On the production machine, of course, we want to load the PG gem. So in production, we do not want this bundle config file, which tells bundler to ignore production gems. Okay? All right. Thank you, Riley. Any other questions? That was a great question. Okay. One more thing. Oh, yeah. Rona, go ahead. Yeah, you can. Great question, Rona. And I was kind of glossing over this, so I'll say this explicitly now. Once you tell Bundle to lock in and to add this line to your gemfile.lock, you can, in future, that Linux platform will always be in gemfile.lock. Okay. When you run bundle install in future, if unless you've deleted gemfile.lock, but if it's there, it will always maintain that line for you. So no problem. You can keep running bundle install in future. It'll maintain that line for you. Okay. So that's cool. Yeah. So yeah, when you run bundle install, bundle looks at your gem file and executes your gem file, but it maintains whichever platforms are already in bundle in gemfile.lock. All right, it maintains those. Okay, great. All right. Um, Once again, folks, if anyone is having connection issues, let me know ASAP, and I might, if more than one person is having it, I might have to end the meeting and restart it, okay? Because there is a 1 hour soft limit on Google Meet for people coming in from outside organizations, and it can sometimes reduce your connection level as a way of encouraging you to pay for Google Suite. Ah, all right, okay. But if there's no major problems, I'll continue. Okay, so now, believe it or not, this is the only change we have to make in our code to switch it to using Postgres in development. That's amazing. All right, that's the only change we have to make for in our code. We have to do one more thing, obviously, which is on Amazon, we have to provision a new machine that's running Postgres database server. All right. And unfortunately, Amazon would charge us money to set up a machine running Postgres because they charge you money for their machines. However, Heroku does you a great favor, and Heroku can give you access to a Postgres server running on Amazon for free with some certain limitations. But I think those limitations should not affect anyone in this class during this semester until you have many more customers. All right. So first of all, from the command line, you can tell Heroku, please create an add-on for me by installing a new Postgres server that my application can use. All right. And when you do this, Heroku will do a couple of things. By the way, this is one way to do it. It's through the command line. There's another way to do it, which is through the let me go to Heroku.com, which is through Heroku's interface. You can also do this. You can just go to Heroku.com and find your login and find your, oh, sorry, hold on. You know what? I'll do this a little bit later. I'll show you later how to go in and do these add-ons business, okay? But you can do it through the command line, and then you can go access it using your settings. Give me a second. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. I'm going to stop presenting my screen because I've got to log into Heroku, and I don't want you to see that on screen. But you know what? I'm also sharing this on YouTube, so I don't want to pause the YouTube stream. Okay, never mind. I'll show you the Heroku interface later. Okay. Or maybe let me see if I can do this safely without exposing anything. I just have to go into my Authenticator app and tap into the code I have, 915910, verify it's me. All right, okay, I'm in. That wasn't too much of a headache. All right, log in. All right. Why won't it not log me in? 1059 847 Verify. Please work. Yes, it's now more or less working. So let me go to my CodePrace API, and I think you can see my screen. And essentially, what I did is what you can do is you can also go to resources, and then here you can add resources, add-ons. You can add certain things. For example, I can add a database. All right. Actually, I can add Postgres. And in Postgres, you see Heroku Postgres right here. All right. If you want to see what add-ons are supported by Heroku, just click on Find More Add-ons. And it's got a huge list of add-ons from databases, monitoring plugins, logging plugins. These are all separate applications that you can add that will be integrated into your application. Okay, so for data stores, you've got a whole bunch of options, including Heroku Postgres. Okay, so Heroku will essentially, and the easy way to do that from the command line is just to type that in, and you can run Heroku Postgres. Okay, excuse me. All right, and what that essentially does is it sets up a Postgres machine for you, and it does one more thing, which is in your, so let me just go back here. In my CodePraise API application, it will, let me just go to settings. In the configuration variables for my application, it will set up automatically a database URL with the address of my Postgres server for me. Okay. The reason that's important is because in my API, long time ago, in environments, in config environments.rb, this was my code. Remember, when we connected to the database, I just looked at the environment variables and the database URL in the environment variables. Okay. In my local computer on secrets.yaml, it's pointing to a SQLite file. But on Heroku, I will not set up that database URL to point to a SQLite. Instead, I will automatically let Heroku set up the database URL. That's the key it uses to set up the Postgres location. Okay. So it will automatically set up the URL for the Postgres server in database URL. So do not touch the database URL configuration variable on Heroku. All right. The other thing it does automatically for you is it sets up your rack env to production. It automatically does that because it knows you're running a Ruby application. All right. All the other environment variables, you have to set it up manually yourself by basically going to this settings tab in your Heroku application. Go to settings, and then there'll be a button to reveal configuration variables, and you have to enter all of these yourself by hand. All right. Okay. So I think there's a question. So let me take a look at that. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's move on. Okay. So how do we now, so this is all the stuff we've got to set up now. And just a quick review of what we had to set up. We had to create the application in Heroku. We had to add a proc file to our application and our API. And in both our application and our API, we have to edit the gem file to read in the Ruby version, and also edit the gem file.lock to add the platform we're going to deploy on. Then we had to edit the gem file to add the PG gem in production, tell bundler not to install PG locally, only in production, ignore the bundle file. Okay. And then tell Heroku, please set up a Postgres database for me. All right. If you run Heroku PG info for example, my APIs, from my APIs project, if I run Heroku PG info, it should soon tell me that you have a hobby level database, okay? And the database only allows you 20 connections. You're using one right now. This is the version of Postgres. This is when it was created. This is how much, this is just some overhead it's already using. It's already got 5 tables in there. I'll tell you why later. Here's the important thing. Because we're using the Postgres database for free, we are only allowed across all our tables to have 10,000 rows of data. That's all it will allow us to have for free. If you want to pay for it, then you can go to resources in Heroku, Postgres, and then here you can change the level of your Postgres database, and you could tell it. So let's go to settings of this Postgres database. No, wait. Durability overview, a hobby level. How to do this? Data clips. No, durability. Um, there's a place here, planning level. I can't, okay, I see, it seems I cannot remember how to do this. Oh, here. Sorry, I don't have to go into Postgres. Just in the resources of my application on Heroku, I go to Postgres and tell it upgrade how that I want to upgrade this to be a paid database. Once you pay for it, it'll give you significantly more space for your database. Okay, and it's not cheap. I'll just tell you that. So Heroku does charge you quite a bit of money to run your own database, okay? But they do take care of updating the database, keeping it on the latest version, managing the security for it, and so on and so forth. Okay, let me pause for a second. Yenyu, you have a question? Oh, or maybe, uh, um, apart from Bijon's cat, let's see what else we want to talk about. I want to extend Rona's question of should we add platforms info in the gemfile.lock in the first place? So we didn't need to use the command line to set it up. I don't understand the answer that we should modify the gemfile.lock in advance. Okay, let me just discuss this again. In gemfile.lock, yeah, we do want to add this to gemfile.lock. I suppose you could do it by hand, but the better way to do it is just to run this command. Yenyu, if your question is not answered, could you just unmute yourself and ask me? Oh, Riley, are you Yenyu spokesperson? Do you have the same question or please? Yeah, you can add it by hand at any time you want. I believe you can add it by hand, that's no problem. Okay. However, to make sure you don't have any small typo in there, because there's an underscore, there's a dash, the indentation has to be perfect. To make sure you don't make any mistakes like that, my suggestion is just to run this bundle command and let it do it for you. Okay. Um, you can adjust it by hand. That's no problem. Okay. I'm just suggesting you use this bundle command so you don't make any typo and then have a problem later on in deploying it. Okay. But I believe you can simply install it by hand because this is the only file this command alters from what I can tell. All right. I hope that answers the question. Go on. Yeah, I had mentioned don't change the gemfile.lock by hand earlier because it's too easy to make a mistake, and it may be out of sync with your gem file. And if your gem file is specifying one thing and your gem file.lock is specifying another thing, then the next time you run bundle install, it'll overwrite your gem file.lock with whatever gem file specifies. Okay. However, this platform section is not touched by bundle install as far as I know. All right. Okay, cool. Thank you. Great questions. And this, by the way, if this is the first year we've had to do this because this is a new feature of Bundler that didn't exist maybe 1 or 2 years ago. So, um, all right. Okay. So we're done. Um, so what do we do next? That's all the configuration. Now, if you want to deploy your application, then you simply git push from your master branch to Heroku's master branch. Okay. And when you do that, Heroku will, you push it to Heroku, you push the Git repo to Heroku. Heroku will receive this Git repo and it will now start processing your Git repo and deploying it. All right. And this is how it processes it. These are all the lines that come out of Heroku. Excuse me, some of these are from previous semesters, but it'll pick up the right Ruby version from gemfile.lock. By default, on Heroku, bundle install will be run and told, do not install development and test gems. All right, so any gems in your gemfile.lock that are, so let's look at my gem file, excuse me, in any files in gem file that are in development or test, like mini test, Rubocop, SQLite 3, and others, these will not be installed on the production server, okay? Because it's not needed in production. So simply, Heroku will run bundle install without development and test because it knows it's in a production environment, all right? One thing, I would highly suggest that you keep the pry gem, which I use in my rake console. I would suggest keeping it outside of development test blocks because there are times when you want to run rake console in production to do some debugging and figure out what went wrong on my production server. Okay, so you'll notice my gem, my pry gem, which I use for rake console, or maybe IRB if that's what you're using for rake console. I keep that outside of, I make sure that's installed even in production, okay, in all my environments. All right. And once it has installed, all the gems, it will then look in your proc file, discover the web process, and then it will run whatever you've specified in the proc file, bundle exec puma. It'll run that and it will deploy it. All right. So now you can go to this web address to find your API. Actually, my API is not quite at that web address, but something like that. Okay. Um, and then lastly, it takes a look at this address to make sure it's really running. In my case, the address is, so let me, if I do HTTP, HTTP:// API, excuse me, credence 2021.herokuapp.com slash, what is the homepage? My server has gone to sleep, so now it's being woken up because 30 minutes passed without me touching it. All right, so it's slowly coming back to life. This is the price we pay for free stuff. All right. It's taking some time to come to life. Okay, so it's come to life. Oh, and it's giving me the read. It's giving me the redirect. Oh, actually, I was interested in my API, but either way. So either way, it's yes, TLS is required. So if I use HTTPS on my API, it should say Credence is up and running at API v1. Okay, so Heroku, the verification, when it says verifying deploy, all it does is it tries to load the root resource of your application, whether it's your API or your web application. It tries to load the root resource and see if it gets a 200 OK message. If it does, then it says, okay, I think everything is deployed and everything's okay. All right. Now, we cannot quite start using our applications because there's a couple of things we have to do. One is on the API, we need to run rake db migrate. So in Heroku, now I am currently, this is my APIs directory. I can run rake, I can tell Heroku, please run the command rake db migrate. And this will migrate my databases, but this time it'll run my migration, but this time on the production database. All right, it'll run it on the production database. And once I've done that, I like to restart my Heroku server so that my application comes back to life and finds the actual database available. All right. I've one more thing, which I don't think is in my slides, which is, excuse me, sorry, I'm going a little crazy here, is in my application, in my, actually, these are my development and tests, so it's no problem. In my application for API URL and app URL, you've got to make sure on the production machine that it's pointing to the right, server. So let me go to my, this is my API. Let me go back to Heroku. Let me find my application. Oh, nope, that's the wrong one. All right, let me go to Credence 2021. And in my settings, reveal configuration variables, you will see that my API URL is pointing to the Heroku address, and my app URL is also pointing to the Heroku address. Okay, so I've got the URLs correctly specified for the Heroku servers now on production. All right. Okay. Any questions so far? Let me see. Yes. Do we need to use do we need to use bundle install on production when we deploy on Heroku? Heroku, when you git push, Heroku will automatically run bundle install for you. Okay, and you see that when you do git push, you'll get a very different message from Heroku than you got from GitHub. You'll notice there's a line in there where it's actually running bundle install for you automatically. Okay, so great question, but that's done for you automatically. All right. Let me see if there's any other questions. You're welcome. Okay, no questions so far. So let me wrap up this discussion with a couple more things, with this last slide before we take a break. Heroku allows you to run any command, any Unix command from your command line on your production server. All right. So I can run any command on my Unix machine on AWS from my local machine by just saying Heroku run. I could even run Heroku run bash, and that'll give me a terminal prompt on my Heroku server. All right. So you're noticing here that, all right. So this is my production server. And of course, it looks just like my local computer because it's got all the same files. If I look at the folder, I'm actually in a /app folder where my application is. Okay, so you can run all the same, all the Unix commands you're familiar with. Some will obviously be blocked. Okay, who am I? User 25473. Fantastic. All right, so that's one thing you can do. And I've also set it up, so I've also got pry in my gem file, so I could also run rake console in, I could also run rake console. It'll take a second to launch up. Ooh, there's an error. What is this error? I've got to find out why rake install. Edgar, please send me a note to figure out why my rake console is not working. Is it working on my Heroku run rake console? Is it running on my app or is this my API? I've got to figure out. I don't know what this error is exactly. I'm going to have to go figure it out later. No, in both cases, it's not allowing me to do it. Let me go figure it out why later. I think I have a strong idea why. But I'll try to verify it later and let you know on Slack, okay? The fix for that, okay? All right, but right now, oh, excuse me, overall, my Credence application should be running on Heroku, Credence 2021, and I should be able to log in. Actually, I've even got a feature which I'll show later today, where I think I can even register a new account. Let me say it's Ruby Baby and Foobar, create a password. I should be able to register. Oh, could not create an account. I wonder why. If you're having errors, this is the way to do it. Go to your application. So in my case, both the web application and the API, and you can run and you can ask Heroku, can you show me the log file of what's going on my machine? So run Heroku logs. There's a little thing you can run here called -- tail, which will not only show you your logs, if you run -- tail, it'll show you logs in real time. So as you're running your application, it'll kind of show you your logs here. Okay. So there's some error. I've got to figure out what this error is here. All right. And I'll try to get that fixed up even during the break if possible. All right. But let me see if I can at least log in. Let's try to log in with an existing one. Let's try Baby Ruby. Okay, and that lets me log in. I had an account already. All right, and I can see this account information. Oh, I know why I couldn't create an account, because I already have an account with this exact same email. All right, so let me just register a new account called Ruby Baby, and it's going to be, let me just say Ruby Baby at Gmail, and then register, hopefully, okay, it seems to have registered it. And now I can log in with my new account as well. All right, great. Okay, that's it for, and that's it makes it sound small, but it's a lot, but that's it for basically setting up my machines on Heroku. Do I install additional software packages? Okay. How to install packages before the API starts running like libsodium. Okay, great question. Interestingly, I didn't have to install libsodium because it seems to be already installed on Heroku. So that's great. If you do want to install other packages, then what you have to do on Heroku is you've got to install what are called build packs. So let me go to Heroku. Screw that one. Let me go to Heroku and let me go to overview, configure add-ons, manage access, resources. I cannot remember how to do build packs. I think Brandon provided a link. Let me click on that to see if that's Let me click on this. If you have other packages and things you want to install, there's several ways of doing it. One is using build packs, which is that there are already Docker images with a lot of popular packages installed, and you simply have to add them to your Heroku application, and they will all get installed before your application is installed, okay? And there are other ways. If you really have a lot of stuff to install and it's kind of complicated, one thing you can actually do is you could even um, create a Docker image for your application, and you can install a Docker image directly onto Heroku. All right. I do that in my SOA class. I'm not going to do that in my security class. All right. But you can actually create Docker images and then just like upload the Docker image. So that works as well. But if you don't want to play around with Docker, then there's a friendly way of playing around with Docker, which is called Heroku build packs. There's already Docker images with a lot of popular packages installed, and you just have to go Google it and find it and tell Heroku, please add that please add that build. Oh, here it is in settings, apparently. In settings, there's build packs, and then you can add a build pack and you can search for it. So for example, maybe I could search for libsodium, enter build pack, could not be found. Oh, build pack URL. So let me go search on Google for libsodium Heroku build pack. Again, apparently I did not need to install it, but if I did need to install it, I can go find a build pack online, and I can either use this Heroku command, or I can use this URL and go to and enter it here in my settings, okay, under build pack. The build pack that's currently installed is Heroku Ruby, because Heroku knows I'm running a Ruby application, okay? So that's the way you do it, or you can do it from the command line. But from what I can tell, libsodium seems to be part of Heroku now, because as of this year, I didn't need to use a build pack. I had to use one a couple of years ago, I remember. So maybe it's become a default on Heroku image, on the default image, okay? But yeah, that's how you can install other things. Okay, if there's no questions, let's take a little break. And what I suggest to everybody is it's 10:24 now, let's say 10:25. I'm going to start teaching again at 10:35, but I'll be online a few minutes before. I'll be online in about 5 to 6 minutes. My suggestion is, please, if you are having problems with our connection, my suggestion is to log out. Excuse me. My suggestion is to exit the meet and re-enter after a while. Okay. If you're not having problems, you can stay on the meet. But while we're taking a break, I strongly suggest please turn your camera off, because we don't want to see what you're doing during the break. Unless you want to show us. No, don't. Okay. And I will also turn my camera off, and see you back in 10 minutes. Please go use the restroom, get some water, run around, scream. Bijan, go play with your cat. Okay. All right. And hey, Bijan, I missed your cat. So when we start again, I want to see your cat when we start the next lecture, if it's still there. Okay. 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 See ya. I'll be back in 10 minutes. So don't show me now. I'll be back.